Welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. We'll guide you through the ups and downs of note investing and teach you all about the nitty-gritty details of the business that other people won't talk about. Your host, Dan Deppen, is a former aerospace engineer and product manager who transitioned away from cubicle life to full-time note investing in 2018. Our website is www.fusionnotes.com, where you can subscribe to this podcast, comment, and find links to other information on note investing.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Deppen, and today I'm going to talk about my weirdest note deal. So this is basically a case study, and it's one of my strangest ones that had more twists and turns than any other deal I've ever encountered. But before I dive into that, I just want to talk a little bit about what I've been up to lately. I've gotten some questions. I know I haven't put out podcasts on a regular basis the last few months, but just been busy. Closed my biggest note deal ever about 6 weeks before recording this, and moved into a new house. So basically bought my dream house. I mean, this place is amazing, and that's obviously kept me pretty busy for a while. But I'm planning a lot of new content that I'm going to release between now and the end of the year. So I'm going to have a number of podcasts, some YouTube videos, a lot more free stuff to help folks learn about notes. So let's talk about my weirdest note deal. So this was a contract for deed. It was in Lima, Ohio. So, Ohio's always been kind of one of the sweet spots for notes. I know some people have become a little afraid of it in recent years because of threats of some different laws being passed, but I've had good experiences in Ohio. I've bought a lot of notes there. I've continued to do that. So this I picked up for $15,500, which was about a little less than 50% of UPB. UPB was like 32 and a half, and then the payoff was about 37,000. So the borrower was fairly far behind. Strangely enough, there were no delinquent taxes. Usually when borrowers get that delinquent, they've got some delinquent taxes on there, but we didn't have that here. So buying the note for $15,500, payoff amount of about $37,000, and my BPO value came in at $65,000 for a 30-day quick sale, or $75,000 for a 120-day list. So it looked like, decent bit of equity. And then one of the things I liked about this deal was that even though it was pretty delinquent, the borrower had made 5 payments over the last 12 months. That's obviously not great, but the thing is, this was still owner occupied, and it had what I like to refer to as signs of life, right? So there were some payments going in, and usually when I buy loans with this profile, I'm getting these to reperform generally about 2/3 of the time. However, this was my first foray into Lima, so I did not have a team on the ground going in. So if you don't know anything about Lima, the population's about 36,000. It's kind of located, sort of south of Toledo, way north of Dayton, kind of in the middle of nowhere land, like this intersection of like Columbus, Dayton, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Toledo. What it's really known for is it's got the last remaining M1 Abrams tank plant. They've been building tanks there since World War II. So that's kind of seems to be about all that goes through Lima. Not a bad town. I did pass through there about 2 years ago when I was doing a tour through Indiana and Ohio and checking out a lot of these different cities. So not too bad. Okay, so I bought the note, and then the first twist and turn was a pretty big scare. So the guy that I bought this note from, who I had known, was kind of friends with, turned out he was defrauding investors on a pretty big scale. So he had some pretty big scams going. I think he stole in the order of at least a couple $1 million. And so all of this broke loose in between the time that I had funded the deal and when he was in, before the loan transfer and before I had received the hard collateral. So I was really freaking out because this was kind of out of left field. I wasn't sure what this guy was going to do. I knew he had talked a lot about like retiring to the island, so I didn't know, is he just going to keep my money and flee the country? Is he going to, he was taking a lot of heat from several people. Is this guy just going to off himself? Like, what the heck is going to happen here? So that just about gave me a heart attack when all of that happened. Fortunately, he followed through on the transaction. I got the hard collateral. The loan got transferred. There were actually no problems. But there was a little window of time there where I wasn't sure. So that was something new for me. I never had that before. So that was the first element of weirdness, but don't worry, there are plenty more. Okay, so talking about the borrower a little bit. So the borrower situation was a little unusual here too. So the original borrowers were a married couple, and the wife was deceased and passed away. So the husband, who was the other borrower, was living in the property, but with his former mother-in-law, which was kind of weird, and I was never totally sure what the relationship was there. I received this letter from the mother-in-law saying how, basically apologizing for falling behind, saying the heater broke and they were using electric heaters, and then that was because they couldn't afford to get the heater fixed, and then that was running up large electric bills. It was just kind of a weird letter, but you at least had people in the property, some level of payment, some indication that they were interested in staying and paying. So, positive sign overall. So attempted to do a workout, and at the time I did this loan, this ended up this actually started a couple years ago, because I was in this deal for 2 years till it was all said and done. I used to use a company called Polaris that's no longer in business anymore. Those guys moved on to other things, but they were a really great third party that I trusted to go out and contact borrowers and try to work out deals. So they were able to get a hold of the borrower. It took some doing. This guy was not responsive. The communication was a huge challenge. There was all this back and forth that kind of drug out for weeks. But eventually the borrower did agree to a trial payment plan and forbearance agreement, which was great. So basically the structure of that deal was borrower makes a down payment, makes a certain number of trial payments, and then if he follows through on all of that, then I modify the loan to basically make the loan current. So take the remaining arrearages, roll those in to the balance of the loan, stretch out the term, and then make the loan current. However, nothing was easy with this guy. He wasn't hostile. He just would he would talk for a little bit and then disappear and then never quite follow through, which is not unheard of. That's certainly not the first time that I run into that. So I ended up starting the foreclosure process. He didn't want to get foreclosed on. We talked some more, and after much more back and forth, he finally agreed to a cash for keys deal. Now, the cash for keys deal, what he's doing is signing a cancellation of land contract, and then I'm giving him cash for that, and then an additional amount for when he actually moves out and leaves. So when you set up these cash for keys deals, I always like to set them up in that kind of two-step process where they get some of the money when they actually sign the cancellation of land contract or sign the papers to terminate the mortgage, and then the rest of it when they're finally out. The nice thing about that is once they sign the papers, if they then don't follow through on moving out, now you're looking at doing an eviction versus having to complete the foreclosure. So it is a much easier process. So that we were actually able to get through and we're able to get him out there. So now I've got an REO in my hands. And in my business model, what I like to do when I get an REO is just turn around and sell it as soon as I can. There are a lot of people who will do notes as a low-cost REO acquisition strategy to maybe do a rehab and flip, or turn it into a rental, or do even a turnkey rental or something like that. Those are all good models. It's just not my model. But anyhow, the house was in pretty rough condition. Various things were broken. There were foundation issues. There were issues with the roof. There were issues with this like really funky looking chimney. It was in pretty rough shape. Again, another thing that's not unheard of. When I get REOs, it's always a big roll of the dice. You never quite know what you're going to get. You know, some of them I've gotten back in great shape and they're home runs, and I've had other ones where they were just super rough and I ended up getting upside down on the deals. Some might ask, like, why would I give him cash for keys if the REO was in rough shape? I mean, I did. Part of the conditions of the cash for keys too is I always want them to allow my realtor to come in and take pictures so we can see what we got. But basically, it was not a lot of money for the cash for keys. And for me, net, it was a better deal than completing the foreclosure and ending up with it. So got it listed for sale, you know, found a realtor locally. I think Dickie Baldwin helped me out with that. I can't recall exactly. Had a number of bites, you know, got some offers in, but none of the buyers actually followed through. And this is something, you know, happened from time to time too. There are a lot of flaky people who put offers in on these and then, you know, don't ever deposit the earnest money or don't ever follow through. So this sale process was kind of dragging on for a bit. And then finally, I found a buyer through Craigslist that was willing to buy it on seller finance. So one of the kind of tricks you can do if you're having trouble finding a cash buyer is you can create a new note, right? So you're selling it to the buyer and you're creating a new note that you're now going to hold. And that can be kind of cool because now you've still got a deal. You can hold that note for cash flow. You can turn around and resell the note. You have a lot of flexibility. Problem we ran into was when we tried to close this is the next problem. The title company said there was a title defect related to the deceased co-borrower. So remember, we had the other co-borrower that was passed away. They never did probate. They never really closed everything out properly. So even though the other borrower signed a cancellation of land contract, this deceased person's estate still had an interest in the property. And obviously she's not around to have her sign the cancellation of land contract. So I was kind of stuck. And, you know, went back and forth with my attorney and said the only real way to fully clear the title was actually to complete a foreclosure. That really stinks because, you know, especially to the co-borrower who made a cash for keys agreement, which he followed through, and I was going to get foreclosed on, which is going to show up on his credit. Not that his credit was great anyways, but it seemed like a crappy thing to have to do, but there was really no choice in the matter if I wanted to be able to sell the property. So I put a rental agreement in place with the seller finance buyer as an interim solution. So I said, listen, we got this title flaw. I will get it cleared. I will pay to get it cleared, but this is Ohio, so it's going to take 6 to maybe 9 months to get this done. She wanted to do a lot of work on the property, so I said, look, we can put a rental agreement in place. I can rent this to you, and then we can close the sale after the foreclosure is completed. Because what I wanted her to do was just close and then like add some agreement where I would pay to finish the foreclosure, and she was dead set against that. She wanted the title completely clear before we closed. So this is the way we're going. Now, this lady turned out to be kind of a career criminal herself. So she never actually followed through and paid any rent at all. She had all these excuses. We went back and forth. She was very nice, very friendly, and had actually started doing work on the property. My attitude at the time was, look, this property is really messed up. You can't really make it much worse. So if she does work on the property and then doesn't follow through on the seller finance deal, I'm not going to be any worse off. Maybe it'll be a little better. But anyhow, she never paid. So then I needed to get her out of there. And then one day, after having some pictures taken just a few days before, the whole property was stripped of copper and wire. So this is the next weirdness. So if you remember during the financial crisis, stripping copper was pretty common, like in the 2010 timeframe. And apparently that's back to some degree. At least I had that happen in, I guess that was early this year, early 2021. I think it was like around February. Completely stripped everything out. And so my assumption that, she couldn't make the place any worse was obviously pretty flawed, because it got a lot worse from there. So now I've basically got this shell of a property. Now, fortunately, the lady across the street saw what went on and basically saw that it was this renter person and a crew of folks. So we kind of knew what it was and who it was, even though I don't, and filed a police report. I don't think the police ever actually did anything, but this was all very helpful when it came to the insurance claim. So having a neighbor who kind of witnessed things, getting a good police report was very helpful. The other thing that helped was just kind of by coincidence, I had some photos taken of the property like a few days before this happened. So I had photos right before, right after, a police report, a witness, and was able to send all of that to the insurance company. Now, this was the second forced place insurance claim I've ever attempted. The first one got denied. I've talked to many different note investors who have had a variety of times where they had a fire, flood, some other catastrophe, and then the forced place insurance didn't pay out because of some nonsense technicality, fine print that they would pull out of anywhere. So I was not real hopeful that I was going to get the insurance money, but I had about as strong a case as you can make. Fortunately, insurance paid out. So they actually paid out $25,000, which was how much how much insurance I had put on it. So that was huge and kind of an unusual occurrence to get paid out in full. Had I been insured for more, I could have gotten more. And that brings up a good discussion topic of when you're getting forced place insurance on a property, what amount should you get it for? And different note investors will have different philosophies on this. My theory of forced place insurance is it really is just an insurance policy. This is something to protect you if there's a disaster. So I try to size the policy so that if doomsday happens and that thing gets paid out, then basically I get made whole in the deal and can break even. Some people want to insure themselves for the unpaid balance. Some people want to insure it for the BPO value. Those are all legit things to do. You're just going to be spending higher premiums over time, and so it kind of depends on how many properties you're going to lose to disaster. But I still had this property on my hands, this shell, so the next goal is to just sell it for what I could. And I actually found a cash buyer that followed through this time and sold the property for $8,000, which selling a house for $8,000 sounds absurd, but considering how messed up this place was, I was kind of happy to get anything. And at the end of that sale, because I did have a realtor that was helping me, I netted $4,264 from the sale of the property. So I had that plus the $25,000 from the insurance. So, net, I was kind of happy. The thing that was really weird too is when I had that title problem, right? Remember, I still had this foreclosure going on. And as I had solicited different advice before I decided to start the foreclosure, there were some people who said, depending on the title company, they might let it go. This whole title issue was kind of in a gray area, which I find really strange because something like title should be pretty black and white, I would think. But the title company that we used for this sale never questioned the issue with the deceased borrower. The sale closed. I got my proceeds, and then I was able to go back and stop the legal process. So definitely a crazy deal with a boatload of twists and turns. So let's look at some of the numbers. So I bought the note for $15,500. My total expenses in the deal, when you add everything, so the legal fees from starting the first foreclosure and then stopping, and then all the expenses related to the cash for keys, expenses for the second foreclosure, all the carrying costs and insurance, and there were a number of different things that happened. That ended up being a little over $13,000. So I had about 28,000, about 700 in total expenses, and cut about 29,200 back. So I basically broke even. I was a little bit positive. So there was a total timeline was 24 months on this deal, and I had a JV partner in the deal too, where we were doing a 50-50 profit split. And so there were a little bit of profits to share. And after the split, he ended up with a 4.4% ROI and then an annualized return of 2.1. So not great, obviously, but given all the insanity, pretty happy just to get out without taking a loss. And honestly, like, very fortunate that things worked out the way they did. I mean, really, the fact that that lady stripped it of copper and wire actually helped out, because I was able to get the full insurance payout. If that had not happened, I actually probably would have been underwater on this one. The other thing that was good about this deal too is my JV partner on this one was a real pro, right? Like, as I was, as this is going on, I'm giving him periodic updates, and we're talking on the phone every now and then. And I kept waiting for him just to freak out, because this was such a crazy deal. But he just, hung in there like a champ. He's like, okay, great. Thanks for letting me know. Let's, what are we doing next? We would talk about things and just kind of proceed. So, very thankful to have a partner like that kind of understands that, while I've shared a lot of case studies on the podcast and other places that were like home runs, 100% of them don't go that way. That's just kind of the way it goes sometimes. All right. So that's what I have for you. If you want to learn more about how to do this, you can reach out at me. You can find more information at fusionnotes.com, or also check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/fusionnotes. And then I mentioned I was working on a lot more content for the end of the year. But one of the things I released earlier this year was the Note Launchpad online training course. So this has a boatload of videos, downloads, templates, checklists, calculators for pricing, performing and non-performing, and a lot of other resources. And what's cool about it, it's all an online course. You can do it at your own pace. You can go really fast if you want. You can go slower. And then we've got our Note Ninjas private Facebook group where you can ask questions and get help. And there just might be a Black Friday sale coming up at some point in a couple weeks for the holidays. So if you might be interested in that, highly recommend go to fusionnotes.com and sign up for my email list so you can get information on that when that becomes available. All right. Well, thanks a lot for listening, and I'll see you next time.